The Pasha of the week is Pasha's Chukass. I'm sure you all know. And the Chukah means a decree that Hashem, to begin with, says, this is a decree that you will not find an understanding of it. There's no way that I can give it to you in a way that you should be able to understand it. Even though the Torah is presented. The whole Torah really is a godly wisdom. And God shows His tremendous love for us, that He has lowered it and presented in such a way that we understand much of it. It makes sense to us, even though there is not one single mitzvah in the Torah that we understand all the way. Because ultimately the mitzvah represents God's wisdom, and we are not capable of comprehending it. Still, He presented in such a way that at the minimum we're able to somehow relate to it. And then He says, however, there are several mitzvahs which are chukim, and you have to accept it as a chuk. You have to accept it as such. There's an episode related during the time that the Alter Rebbe was in prison, and he was interrogated very thoroughly. The Alter Rebbe was being accused of traitorship, and he was a traitor. The whole accusation was based on the fact that the Alter Rebbe would collect money and send it to Eretz Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe established Koil Chabad and sent it to Eretz Yisrael to support Koil Chabad strikes a note. Well, Koil Chabad, the kitchen in Jerusalem, it's a very broad thing. It's not just the kitchen in Jerusalem. It supports Eden who sit and learn. It's a koil. A koil means people sit and learn also. And in those days, you may know the story just briefly, the Mendele Horodoker. The Mendele Horodoker, who was really the Alter Rebbe's Chaver by the musician Magid, but he was much older than the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe had actually accepted him as his Rebbe after the musician Magid passed away. The Alter Rebbe accepted him as his Rebbe. And then Mendele went to Eretz Yisrael. And the Alter Rebbe undertook, and the Alter Mendele went with the whole entourage, and the Alter Rebbe took it upon himself to support him, because at Yisrael there was no means of support at all in those days. So the Alter Rebbe would collect money and send it to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael in those days was under the Turkish rule, part of the Turkish Empire. Turkey was huge in those days, and Turkey was in constant war with Russia. So the accusation said that he is sending money to the Turkish caliphate, whatever it was called, the Turkish monarchy, that they would build an army to invade Russia. This is how the accusation was formulated. Tagged on, this was the basic accusation. You know that the whole accusation was formulated. It was what's called a Mesira. it was it was created by the Misnagdim, who wanted to put the Alter Rebbe away, to stop with the spread of Chassidus. So this was the basic accusation. They knew that by presenting this type of a threat, even in the remotest, in the most absurd type of possibilities, the government would take it very seriously. But tagged on to that, the whole development of the whole accusation was much more. And among the things that they accused the Alter Rebbe was, they would say to the Alter Rebbe that the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, this was just after the Tanya was published, that in Tanya the Alter Rebbe says that the Goyim, Umas Ha'olam, do not have any good at all. Even the good that they do is not pure good. That's what it says in first page of Tanya. So, when it came to the interrogation, they interrogated the Alter Rebbe very, very thoroughly. Many questions the Alter Rebbe said that he wants to respond in writing because it requires elaboration. And the Alter Rebbe's answers were very thorough and very wise, and they were close to the end of the whole interrogation, ready almost to cancel out the whole thing. And then at that point they started taking up certain peripheral, less significant aspects. And one of the things was, they said, how come you write in your book that Goyim do not have any good at all? Do not have any good. That's what it says in first Perek time. Umas Ha'olam ein b'hem toif klal. So the Alter Rebbe stood there, and he looked up and down the judges, and he has a little bit of a smile on his face. It's kind of effectively saying to them, do you really want me to explain it? Do you really want me to count? Do you really want me to answer that? And after, a few seconds of this type of interchange, quiet interchange, they canceled the question. See, Alter Rebbe later explained that what was the interchange, which the Alter Rebbe meant to convey to them with his smile and his look, which they got, was, you see that we had a long interrogation, a long debate, and each one of your questions I answered satisfactorily and clearly, convincingly. Do you really want me to answer this question? And they kind of got the hint, and they dismissed the question. The point is that when you see something coming to life, something very clear, something that opens, like the Torah opens one's mind, opens one's heart, reveals truths of the creation, and lets a person, opens up the path for a person to understand what his life is about. And then there comes one aspect in the Torah that he cannot begin to understand. So there, the Rebbe says to him, Hashem says to him, trust me, I haven't misled you till now. this is something which is beyond your understanding. But now that you've learned Torah, you have the means to take this also in full force, without losing anything, without saying, "Oh, I'm giving up my intellect." But ultimately, what we want to understand is the Gemara says, "Lenitnu ad mitzvahs, elo letzarei boros abriyos." That mitzvahs essentially are instrumental to purify people, letzarei, to cleanse them, wash them off from all their impurities, and bring out the best in them. So if we talk about Letzaref Beres Abriyos, Letzaref, the term Letzaref is a borrowed term from Mitzraf like Kesef. When you mine silver, so silver, when it's first mined, is all mixed with earth and all kinds of impurities. And then you put the silver through a very high heat, and the heat melts the silver down to such a point where it completely purifies, separates from all impurities, and you can pick up the silver, pure silver. And the better it's purified, the better quality silver it is. Sometimes some impurities are left, and that's not the pure silver. Pure silver, this is what, the sterling proof that is sterling silver, which means it's a really pure silver that was purified all the way. So to purify, just like silver, you cannot purify it by some magic, supreme thought. To purify the silver, you have to apply to it that which affects it directly. So if mitzvahs, as the Gemara says, to purify the people. How do you purify? Purify by presenting it to their intellect and to their emotion, so that their intellect and emotion becomes purified. How do you purify? Through giving them a mitzvah that they have no way to relate to. Do you understand? Not only do they understand, but they cannot understand. You told them to begin with, this is something which is beyond you. Obviously, there is a direct effect, even though we cannot take it with our intellect, but there has to be a direct effect to us from the Chukass. And not only does it have a direct effect and it has a purifying quality, but actually the ultimate purifying quality effect comes from the Chukass. This is why in the Chukass there are many mitzvahs in the Torah are called chukim. But this chukkah of Hora Aduma is called Chukass HaTorah. Chukass HaTorah means it's the chukkah that is basic to the whole Torah. Because what's meant the Chukass HaTorah? The Torah has many things. It has Chukim, it has Mishpotim, it has Eidos, it has many mitzvahs. This is called Chukass HaTorah, the Chukah of the Torah itself. Which means that this puts the Torah in a different perspective. It says that the whole Torah is a Chukah. So clearly, if the Torah is the Tzad of Bemis Abriyos, then Chukass HaTorah clearly has that power. And that's the intent of Chukass HaTorah. So the explanation to this is we have discussed many times, I'm sure you've learned, that every mitzvah in the Torah, even mitzvahs that we can intellectually understand and have an intellectual perspective on it, such as civil laws, Geneva, Gzeila, all kinds of different laws that we can readily relate to. But even though we can relate to them, we have to know that when we do this mitzvah, not only when we do this mitzvah, but the mitzvah as contained in the Torah is not based on the rationale that we can apply to it. The rationale that we can apply to it simply says, oh, I can understand why Hashem, what's behind it. I can relate to this mitzvah with myself. But not to say that that's the basis of this mitzvah. The basis of every mitzvah, even the simplest and the most obvious one, like a signet, the seed, is essentially, underneath it, is also a chukah.
Sorry, what is the definition of chukah?
Decree. A decree means, this is how I decree it, and you can't question it, even though you don't understand it. And we should be able to relate to this and understand the basics, the basic concept behind it, and how this affects how we can relate to it. Let us discuss more in detail. Just to show how clearly that every mitzvah is really meant as a chukah. We see it from the fact that in the Aseres HaDibros, 10 Commandments, which is what's called the basis of the whole Torah, and all the mitzvahs of the Torah, all the 613, are actually, according to Ibsad Doan, actually derivatives of these 10. All relate to one of the 10 mitzvahs. These are basic mitzvahs. And among these mitzvahs, there is the mitzvah, the first mitzvah, to know that there is one God that is the basis of all existence. And you should not stray to any other worship. And you should remember Shabbos. It's also an aspect of holiness. And then also, don't kill and don't steal. Where is the proximity? Where is the relationship? How do these two inyonim or three inyonim, the signal, the sixer, the sitza, how can they find place amongst these lofty mitzvahs that really bring us up to a different level, to know God and to know Shabbos, to completely define our existence in a totally different way. This is something which is common. And yet they're both part of the Saseres Adibris. So, to understand it, and the message in this is, as we understand it from a world perspective, actually has a practical and worldly basis. Because it seems that people cannot live alone. People have to live with other people. It has to be an organized and safe society. And in order to be able to live in a society, you have to have social laws. Otherwise, society would fall apart. People would not be able to cooperate and live with one another. Which means an examination that this mitzvah, lo signov, is significant only while we are part of a broader, of a society. But if I were to think of myself alone, as an individual, not as part of society, then it would not have any meaning. Why not? Like we discussed many times. The Yetzer Hara, your belly doesn't know the difference what bread you're feeding it, whether bread that you earned or bread that you stole from someone else. It fills the belly just equally. But the mitzvah, as it is present in the Torah, says that this is not a social mitzvah. This is a mitzvah to each individual. In other words, it's significant to an individual as he is an individual, not only as he's part of society. This is why, at least it's revealing in the fact that the Aseres HaDibros are said in single form, not in plural. It starts off, Onoichi Hashem Elokecho, not Elokeichem. Elokecho means, we learned what's Elokecho. Elokecho means yours in single, not plural. Plural would be Elokeichem. The second is Lo Yiyeh Locho, not Lochem. And then until the Shabbos, 6 days you should work, you should not work, also against single. Lo Sivtzov, Lo Sinov, Lo Signov, all in single form. Doesn't say Lo Signoivu. Later on, actually, in Pashas Noishim, it says Lo Signoivu and so forth. But here it says in single form. Which means that these are mitzvahs that are pertinent to an individual as he is to himself. These mitzvahs, therefore, it means that these mitzvahs are defining his connection to Hashem, not his connection to society. It is an individual level. And from that respect, in terms of his connection to Hashem, it makes a very great difference whether he's eating his bread that Hashem gave him or bread that he stole from someone else. It makes a big, big difference. We spoke the other day, if he eats bread that Hashem gave him, he eats Hashem's bread from Hashem's hand. Otherwise, he is relating to the world, not nothing to do with Hashem. He's breaking away from Hashem. And the mitzvahs are there to connect him to Hashem, to establish his connection to Hashem. And therefore they're significant entirely on an individual basis. So here we have a clear situation, and although this mitzvah is something that we can readily relate to, we can understand it. We can even explain it to the point where governments, societies that are not based on Torah at all, also create this type of laws. But the way it is in the Torah, it means something else completely. It is true that we can relate to it and understand it, but our understanding of it is only a means for us to relate into the mitzvah, but it's not the exhausting, the end of its significance. Its significance goes much, much deeper and further. Its significance goes all the way to the very core of a Yidden's relationship with Hashem, not his relationship with other people. Not what kind of person is he in the world, but what kind of person is he in God's world, in terms of a relationship to Hashem. This transcends the world. And therefore, having gone into this and understand this, we can now understand a little better what the Gemara says, that the mitzvahs are given with tzarei v'abazabriyas, to purify, to cleanse, to bring out the pure quality that is in the human being. Like we said before, to have pure silver. What is the pure quality in the human being? If a human being is a very fine, decent human being, in all of his actions, but all of his actions are based on some type of a worldly, social calculation, just as we understand that a person refrains from stealing because he is afraid to be caught by the cops, we understand that this person is lacking some aspect of finesse. He doesn't really relate, he doesn't really understand and relate to true quality, human qualities. So too, we go further and further and deeper until we say that if a person does not steal because of any kind of worldly substantiation, he is still not to the core. God still hasn't brought out the best in him. When does it bring out the best in him? Is when he recognizes that this is the core of his connection with Hashem, and recognizes that what is the real core, what is the real pure human being. The pure human being is that aspect of the human being where he recognizes that he and Hashem is one thing, that he comes from Hashem. That's a pure human being. And this is what it means that that mitzvahs purify a person. Not that they make him a good citizen, a good member of society. They bring into his life, they bring out in his life the true quality of his neshama. The neshama doesn't care about society, doesn't care about citizenship. The neshama knows only the truth. And the mitzvahs are instrumental of bringing out that beautiful aspect of the neshama. It's meant that this is the ultimate purpose of mitzvahs, as the Gemara says. Therefore, this leads us to be able to understand what we are learning in today's Parsha. All the mitzvahs, as we said, most of the mitzvahs, we can begin to relate to them, but ultimately we go beyond that which lends itself to our intellectual relation, intellectual definition. And we go to the point where we recognize, hey, yes, like I pointed out before, that if a person does eat someone else, or he steals, or he gets something in the wrong way, he is breaking away from Hashem. And this is the most important part in his life. He's losing the real core of what a human being is. A human being, a Yid in this world, what is his function? What does he stand for? He stands for God's presence in the world. And when is that beauty come out? This is what the mitzvahs bring out. Where he becomes purely a godly act. And this is will allow us to understand this first pasuk in Ash, when it says, "Zois Chukass HaTorah." So we understand that in truth, every mitzvah has a quality of chukah, not the same as chukass as chukah of Paradum that we can't understand at all. But even the mitzvah that we understand, the understanding of it is at the level of a chukah. Because ultimately, when we say that there's a difference between a stolen object or an earned object, just in and of itself, that's not something that we can elaborate on, we can explain in worldly terms. Just give you an illustration of the concept. Sukkahs, you have to make a sukkah, and the most important part of the sukkah, of course, is the schach. The Torah says, Chag HaSukkis Tasa L'cho. Now the festival of Sukkot, you should make L'cho to you. From this L'cho, we learn now, the Chachomim, the Gemara explains that what does the word L'cho mean? L'cho means that it has to be yours. This Chag has to be yours. And which means that stolen schach is possible to schach that was stolen from another owner, from somebody else, is possible to. So when you go out in the field and you start cutting bushes or branches of trees, and you say, hey, let's say even the branches over here. My branches right here in this courtyard. It's owned by the yeshiva. You're not stealing it from anybody. These branches are kosher for schach. That's a question. However, you don't know historically what was the process, what transpired on this land until the yeshiva acquired it. It's conceivable that at some point in time, someone owned it, and he was robbed of it illegally. He didn't sell it. He was thrown out of this land. So even though it changed many hands, but we have a rule that karka ain't exempt. Land cannot be stolen. Now, ownership of land can only be transferred if it's legally transferred. So therefore, technically, from the Torah perspective, this land is still owned by the original owner who never sold it, but who was thrown out of it. So therefore, when we take branches from these trees, even though nobody cares about it, right? So you're not really taking anything from anybody. But technically, they are stolen trees, and they're all possible for sukkah. This is why, when we make a sukkah, we do not ourselves go and cut the branches. We have someone else cut it for us. Because if someone else cuts it, so it gets transferred hands after it's cut. When it transfers hands after it's cut, from the cutter to the owner, to the suit, then it becomes yours already.
And the cutter has liability.
The cutter has liability, right, but the one who uses it for the sutra, it can use it.
It's been laundered, so to speak?
Right, it's been laundered in a technical sense. In other words, at that point, if the owner does come back and he wants his half, you can pay for it. You're not obligated to return to him this half. It's no longer his. He has only monetary relation to it, not an individual, not direct relation to it. That's what it means. That's why we have someone else cut this stuff. Okay. This I went in the side issue, but I'll explain to you. What it means is like this. If you own this Gemara, okay, someone comes and steals it from you. At that point, if he is caught, he is obligated to return to you that very same Gemara. He cannot say, you know what, I want this Gemara, I'll pay you $10 for it. It's yours. You own it. But if he takes the Gemara and sells it to someone else, so then the din is like this. If it took a long time between the robbery and the sale, to the point where during this time you already found out that you lost the object, you don't have it, and you gave up hope. It's called Yush. Yush means you give up hope of ever getting it back. When you give up hope of having it back, in a sense, your relationship to the Gemara directly is broken. And he goes and he sells it to someone else. And then the whole thing is discovered. He has a monetary liability. But you cannot go to the purchaser and take it back from him. Because your relationship to that article has been broken. You no longer own the article, you have a monetary claim on it. Okay, so this is true immovable objects. But when you talk about land, real estate, there's no such thing. If a piece of real estate is robbed, which means somebody is throwing off the real estate by force, and someone else settles in this, and then he sells it to 10 other people over a period of who knows how long, and the original owner gave up hope of ever getting it back many times over, he still technically owns that land. I'm sorry? Unless you know the history of this piece of land, that this piece of land was what's called maiden land at the time when it was settled. I mean, the United States is more or less easy because the United States was settled just a few hundred years ago. Before that, but the Indians did not claim ownership, of the entire United States. They were in certain places. So conceivably there would be land that is completely maiden land, it's called. Then there would be no problem. But even during these few hundred years, many things happen. And in any case, this is our custom. And in Europe, for sure. I mean, every piece of land in Europe has changed hands thousands of times, hundreds of times, and in many cases it has changed hands inappropriately. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah. They're expert on that. This is called Karka Einon Ixelos. That land cannot be robbed. Which means of course you can rob land. But when you rob it, it means that you just take it, but it doesn't become yours. Whereas a movable object, a metalter, it can ultimately become broken, taken away and become yours. In the sense, not yours, but in other words, it has to be two things. It has to be Yiyush and Shimur Rishus. The owner has to have given up hope of really getting it back, and the original robber had sold it somewhere else or given it somewhere else. So then the article is no longer associated with the original owner. There's a monetary liability anyway, but the article itself is free. Okay? So that's why when we cut it, that becomes already a movable object. Now when you give it to someone else, it's legitimately his. And you can use it for schach. Okay? Now this concept is purely a Torah concept. It goes beyond any worldly explanation of the reasons for robbery. But therein lies the full power of this L'tzar B'Mesabris, to purify the people. But the purification is such that it does not only explain to them, this is yours or not yours, but explain to them that this is something which you've gotten, as we spoke many times, directly from Hashem. This is yours all the way up. Hashem created the world and He gave it to you. This piece of property. Then it's yours 100%. That's true purification. And here's where we come to Chukass HaTorah. A chukah is that type of a mitzvah that even at its inception, even at its superficial periphery, we cannot really relate to it. Such as sharpness, Rashi says sharpness, or dietary laws like certain animals are not to eat, certain animals are not allowed to eat, which are things which we do not have a means of relating to it at the same. Although there are many reasons given for it, but these reasons are given after the fact. In other words, once you have the mitzvah, you can say, okay, there is this quality and this quality. But essentially, you cannot say that this reason explains the mitzvah. That's what a chukah is. Especially when you live amongst goyim, Rashi says you live in the world, and you become a makri when you say, oh, you can wear sharpness. What's a sharpness? Mix of linen and wool together. What's wrong with it? It's a very good fabric. And what is our answer? The answer is that yes, indeed, I don't understand it. But I do not understand it because I understand only things that are in the worldly context. And in the worldly context, there is no way to explain this. But I don't live in the worldly context. I live in the godly context. To me, the world is created constantly by God. I relate to all things in the world, not from a worldly perspective, but from a godly perspective. And on a godly level, yes, there is a big difference. And this is the real aspect of the Tzara Ben Azabris, that it brings out in the person, in us, the purest quality, that even though we have midos, we have attributes and feelings, and then we have seichel, but ultimately this reveals, Torah reveals in us that midos and seichel, that's not the whole person. That there is a deeper, a truer aspect in the person. Where the person directly, not through his seichel, not through arguments and justifications, but directly relates and recognizes that what is life? Life is his relationship to Hashem. That's when it's true life. And this is why the Pasuk says, Zois Chukass HaTorah, which as explained, I pointed out before, the expression in the Pasuk, Chukass HaTorah, the Chukah of Torah, means that this Chukah tells you that the whole Torah is a Chukah. Everything in the Torah, even those aspects in the Torah that we seem to be able to understand, is also a Chukah. And this Chukass HaTorah, this aspect of Torah which is Chukah, which is the deepest aspect of the Torah, this is the most powerful instrument by which we get purified, which brings out the best in us, the truest in us, that elevates us out of the quagmire of worldly confusion and brings us into a pure and a clear world. Gives us a clear, true perspective on life. Because in the world, even if a person leads a perfectly legitimate, a perfectly decent life, so he lived a decent life in the world, it still does not explain what did he really accomplish. What was the point of it? What does it mean? At best, it's okay, he lived in the world and he didn't destroy anything. So, yes, he gets a thank you by not destroying, but what is the ultimate accomplishment? What happened as a result? What's the purpose of the whole exercise? But Chukass HaTorah and the real purification that we get from the Torah, from Torah Mitzvah, and Chukass HaTorah, there is not just the avoidance of evil. He didn't destroy anything. There is a constructive and a profound effect by every one of our deeds. It actually purifies the person, and through him it purifies the whole world and reveals the truth in the very world itself. It reveals that the world itself is godly, and prepares the world for what we say there should be a dira b'tachteinu. What does a dira b'tachteinu mean? You heard that term, right?
Yeah, but
A dwelling place for Hashem in the lower world. And Chassidus explains that what is a dwelling place? What's the expression of dwelling place? Clearly, does not mean that God is homeless now and He's at home. It means to express that God's presence in the world would be in such a way, in such a level, where it can be illustrated only by the freedom and the comfort that a person feels in his own home. A person in his own home is completely unrestrained and unrestricted because it's his home. Everything in his home is exactly according to his will, the way he wants it, and represents his will. He feels comfortable with it. If a certain picture is hanging on this wall and like it over there, it goes over there. It's exactly representing his chushim. Adira b'tachteinu means that the world is perfectly representing God's will. And the only way that can happen, that was the effect, that was what is instrumental in bringing this about, is this Chukass HaTorah. Is the recognition that mitzvahs themselves, and the very basis of mitzvahs, is the concept of chukah, the concept of the fact that the mitzvahs are godly mitzvahs, not mitzvahs that are worldly mitzvahs, worldly good deeds. This helps us to understand the difficulties that we sometimes face, the challenges that we find, that we confronted when it comes to doing a mitzvah, when it comes to learning and davening. Because in fact, doing a mitzvah, the Alter Rebbe says, doing a mitzvah is in effect an aspect similar to Mesiras Nefesh. It's not Mesiras Nefesh in the literal sense. God forbid anybody should ever be tested with that type of a test. But every mitzvah is an aspect of Mesiras Nefesh. Because at this moment, he's doing a mitzvah. What does that mean? I'll be explaining. He's doing essentially that which God wants, which means he essentially dissociates himself from his world, and he says, no, the truth of the world is Hashem. This is Mesiras Nefesh. What's Mesiras Nefesh? Mesiras Nefesh is he gives up his world and he connects to Hashem. This is where the difficulty is. But we have to understand that this difficulty is what the whole Inyan is all about. The whole effort is all about. This is what's really purifying us and what really elevates us and what really gives us that true accomplishment that we accomplish through our actions, the Torah mitzvahs. This is why we say that our avodah in this time, in time of the Golus, and when we are challenged, when everything is difficult, and everything is with a milchama, with a war, we have to fight with ourselves and fight with the whole world, because we're breaking through the barriers, we're breaking through the facade, the worldly facade. We're saying, yes, this is a world, but this is a godly world. And the world represents God's will, not represents a presence on its own. It's a challenge. And it's difficult. It's like a milchama. There's a resistance. There's a resistance from inside. Our own bodies resist it. Our own nefesh abamis resist it. No, I want to feel comfortable in my world. And certainly the outside world resists it. Say, what are you doing? You're forgetting about the world. But this, in fact, is what Torah mitzvah is all about. And that's what Torah says. Zois Chukass Torah. This is the principle of Torah. The principle of Torah, the very essence of Torah is a chukah. Is the union of chukah, the union that Torah transcends world and purifies world. Knowing this and recognizing, understanding the principle behind it gives us the tremendous encouragement and the strength to go through with it. And understand that every time we are challenged, oh, that's the place to go. That's the thing to do. Because that's when we have the real breakthrough. That's when we have the real accomplishment. And then after a while, we find ourselves in bright sunlight. We find that the world no longer interferes with our life. We see a bright life. We see real meaning in life. We see real joy, godly joy. That's what a chassid is. We should all be matzliach in our individual tasks.